Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dynamics Corner, the podcast where we dive deep into all things Microsoft Dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned expert or just starting your journey into the world of Dynamics 365, this is your place to gain insights, learn new tricks, and hear from industry experts. In today's episode, we're diving into an exciting and critical topic, especially for our developer listeners out there. I'm your host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode is recorded on June 22nd, 2023. Kris.
Yes,
back at it again. These episodes are piling up. I wish I could do these all day, every day. But as you have mentioned, today we had the opportunity to speak about a topic that's important in the development community, and it's about developers transitioning from CAL to AL, as well as getting involved and getting new members to the community for developing. With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with Tonya. Glad you could make it.
Hey, welcome, Tonya.
Tonya, welcome. Thank you for
me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for taking your time to speak with us. We appreciate it. We understand your time's valuable. As always, looking forward to having a discussion. Do you remember what we're talking about?
I thought you were telling me what we're talking about.
Whoa. See, that's it. We're coming back. We're getting it. No, we're talking about transitioning to AL from NAV from a developer point of view, as well as a few other things that you do.
Good.
It's good. So before we get into that, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a developer that I live in central Wisconsin. So
Everybody's in Wisconsin these days.
Yeah.
In the Midwest.
I don't understand it. I never heard of Wisconsin before. Or I did, but over the past couple of years, over the past couple of years, the more people I speak to, the more I realize people are from Wisconsin.
It's a great state.
I need to just start talking to different people.
Yeah.
I thought Wisconsin's in like Minnesota. They're not the same? Same
Okay.
kind of people?
Not the same. They're similar people.
Minnesota's its own state, Kris.
No, I know, but they're like very similar people.
No, we'll have to finish that up. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. So I'm a developer. I've been a NAV Business Central developer since about 2016. So been on the partner side and doing a lot of custom development. And I guess in the last probably 2 years, I've been getting more involved in the community and getting more involved at conferences and, continuing to learn and grow and super excited about where the product's been going.
That's great. We appreciate all that you do for the community as well. That's the other half of the conversation, because I think going from a developer from NAV to AL was one topic. And then also coming from behind the development chair, I guess you could call it. And you see what I did there, Kris?
Yeah.
The dynamic development chair, or that dynamic chair. It's in the corner. But just getting out there and getting involved in the community, talking about the product from the technical aspect versus the functional aspect, and some of the things that you can do from the development point of view, because the ERP application's amazing, but the back-end development side of it's great as well, too, as far as what you can do to implement the application. So you started back in 2016.
Yeah.
Did you have any development experience prior to that?
No, actually. I went back to school to become a software developer, and my mom is actually a developer, so in NAV. And so,
Whoa.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's history.
So
That's awesome.
there's history. Yeah.
So you're a second generation Business Central developer.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
That's the way to get people into this, I think, because I think you need to train your offspring.
I think in general, just like the whole grow your own like developer or consultant is like super cool because you can show them all the ins and outs. You don't necessarily have, all these other conflicting views. You can kind of just really dig into Business Central or NAV. They're one and the same now, but so I was going to school for being a software developer, and as people always do, you talk about your kids and what your kids are up to. And she was at Directions, and she was talking about how her daughter's going for software development, and like, would she be interested in an internship? And I'm like, who wouldn't be interested in a paid internship to, do software development? So I got to start off working from home remotely as an intern, and I've been a remote developer ever since. I think I came in at like the perfect time because I saw how NAV was, especially working in or developing in Seaside, and so picking up all of the nuances of how do all these people develop, and making the transition so it's more new age development wise. You're in
modern,
VS Code. Yeah. Yeah, modern development.
That's exactly it. Jeez, I'm tongue tied. You guys have, you're talking and I have so many questions for you because you're hitting so many key areas. I'm trying to keep track of them and write them down. But yes, it's now what I would call a modern or contemporary development environment that we get to work with. So I did not know that your mom was a NAV developer and then she
Yep.
brought you into it. So this is an interesting journey that you have here because the development resources are scarce now. And how do you get these resources, these development resources, to come into the community to learn the application? So you went to school to learn software development.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had to take a step back and go into this Pascal-based development language without an integrated development environment within the object designer to learn Cal, right? Which AL is similar to. How did you get into it? Did you focus on learning the application first, or did you get into the development and your mom was giving you examples, or when you went in for the internship, they gave you examples to develop?
So I think I just kind of jumped right in with the development side of it. So adding fields to tables or string tables, pages, code units. I think like at that point in time, there were really like a shortage of resources available for how do you develop in NAV? How do you, create a sales order? How do you invoice it? What's the posting process look like? Like there wasn't a ton of documentation. Like I remember I would watch a lot of videos. So some of the MVPs, that posted their videos on how to do things. That was how I learned. There wasn't, all this great documentation, examples of how do you do all of these things like we have now in Microsoft Learn. But I think like the consultants that I worked with were really good about teaching me the business process. So like when my mom and I talk, she knows the business process because she's been doing this for over 20 years. She understands all the ins and outs, and she's, a warehouse goddess. Like she understands all of that stuff. So if I have lot tracking questions, I'll call her up and ask her. But I'm more of like the technical dev person that do all of this new stuff, and so she's calling me, asking me all these questions.
No, that's great. It must be great family dinners when you get together to talk about.
Oh, it's interesting.
Talk shop while eating dinner.
There has always been a scarcity of resources. There seems to be, a shortage. Just the products taking off and doing well, at least here in the U.S. But they have done a great job with putting information out on how to do things and keeping it updated. And as you had mentioned, there's a lot of members in the community that share a lot of information that makes it easier for someone to come in.
You know, I think Tonya hit a key point there. I remember when I started like 2009, 2008, and I struggled finding information to get started. I had similar story as you, Tonya. I came from a different development language, and coming into Cal, it was a weird transition, and there was nothing out there that you can find. You had to know somebody to kind of, you know, walk you through. And so having your mom, you know, with that knowledge, that's awesome, because yeah, it's not always available. Now they've done a lot, you know, better in terms of documentation now, but it was hard.
That's great. And then you get an internship to do it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So how was it through that journey? I mean, to me, it's a double-edged sword, because knowing the application, knowing the development, having the technical skill set, the business skill set, it's where do you draw the line is like what you need, because it's not the type of development in the sense where some of the other software development organizations, where they have someone who comes up and draws all these, you know, nice detailed specs and designs, and we need to do this. It's, you already have a core ERP application that you need to enhance the process of. So sometimes it's a struggle to, how do you make the modification versus, you know, the right place to do the modification versus use existing functionality. This is something I talk about often. It's like that whole big, you know, dilemma of what's the best way to do this. So how was it getting into that when you first started?
I think I did really well, like kind of jumping in and understanding the process. I actually did order entry at a previous job in an ERP system, so I understood how kind of the process works of working in an ERP system. So some of the other interns that I worked with, they, you know, they were fresh up, you know, they're still in college, like younger than I was, like, yet they don't understand the whole business process. Like, even if it's not necessarily NAV, it, like, I had that business understanding of how, you know, things work, how you move things in and out of inventory a little bit. So I understood what modules I might need modifications to. But I think, like, where it was lacking was, you know, like the modern dev environment. So as it progressed and we started getting events, I found that a lot easier to relate to, like, object-oriented programming principles. And so when we started, you know, working in AL, I had taken classes on how to use Git, and no one that I worked with knew Git. And so it was a very interesting position to be in as, like, the low person on the totem pole, trying to explain to people who've done this their entire lives, like, we have to change and you have to create branches, or you need to, you know, do all of these things that, you know, it's hard to change, and I understand that. And I also was very, like, I have a degree in database development, so I did a lot of reporting. So, like, reporting's a big passion of mine, and doing Power BI or like RDLC layouts and everything. And obviously that's been a pain point within, you know, NAV and BC.
Who likes reporting?
So,
I won't touch one these days. My days of doing reports are done. So having a strong business foundation helped you with your career as a Business Central developer.
Yeah.
And it is, I was listening to your story and your journey, and a lot of things came to mind. There was a lot of talk when they started talking about the new environment or where it's going to go. And one of the benefits that I saw, I had a conversation with somebody at one point, they were talking about, was by moving to this type of a development environment, right? They did it for a number of reasons, but one of the byproducts that there was a hope for is that it would become more enticing for other language developers to want to move over to learn this language, because the environment's the same as you had mentioned. You have Git, you have VS Code, you have all these things. And that whole process that you're talking about, I don't know, what's the saying? You can't teach an old dog new tricks or something like that. It is a challenge because a lot of the resources, they had to change some of their processes or thinking because now there are more rules. If you use the source code analyzers or the code analyzers, and then also they could talk about having good procedures and processes for test automation and the like, where back when I started in 1922, it was like no man's land. You just went in, you were able to modify whatever you needed to modify. People upgraded whenever they upgraded. And then when you did, it was like, wow, let's just try to figure out what changed and try to put it in where there was a customization or not. So there are some challenges for those there, but it is possible and it can be done. You just have to have the open mind for it and almost like wipe your brain of process, not necessarily what you know within the language, but the process of developing within, the object C-side object designer versus over into AL. So you had an easy transition because you didn't have a lot of those bad habits. And
right.
Ooh, those bad habits.
Trying to tell your consultants, like, no, you cannot, like, just go and make your own changes. Like, we need to manage code, or you can't just go and put your code anywhere you want. You need to use events now. Like, understand
that's beautiful.
Understand that, like, it's what you've always done and it's what you're used to. And so I think there was really a point where everyone kind of struggled. How do we, make Business Central as great as NAV was in terms of customizing it? And so I think, being able to have all the events that we have now that we can subscribe to, or, all the different patterns that we can use to enhance Business Central.
I am a huge fan of I've been at it and I appreciate the structure and discipline that we have to have now. And I had always hoped for it. I had done a lot with PowerShell scripts to try to export the objects so that we could put them in, believe this or not, like Visual Source-ish way back in the day. I tried to come up with ways of scripting it, and then you went into it's just, but now it's nice to have these processes, and there are some challenges because everybody thought, I can just make the modification, but they don't realize the importance of the discipline. And this is my big push, is to try to restrict who can do that, because throwing an extension in there, bad enough as it is, people can download things from App Source with, and then ask you questions. But I don't mean bad, but there's some flexibility where they can introduce, other extensions into the application. But now if consultants are out there making modifications, they're not going through any automated testing. They're not going through any source control. You can put yourself and the customer in a rough position. So it's very important to have that discipline. And I'm a big fan of it. So I'm happy to hear that you had some of those woes too.
Yeah. And I actually, I left and came back to the channel for like 2 years. Yeah.
Why'd you leave?
It just, from being in school and being a software developer, I was like, okay, I learned how to be like a C# programmer. I know all this reporting stuff. Like, I paid a bunch of money to do this. Maybe the grass is greener somewhere else while all these dinosaurs figure out how to work through the challenges of moving to AL and Business Central.
Did she just call us dinosaurs, Kris? Did she just
I think she's been listening.
I think you just called us a dinosaur. So you left the channel. Did you go work at another software development organization?
Yeah. So it was like kind of a homegrown kind of CRM product, and I was in charge of all the reporting. And like, it's weird to say, but there are places where reporting is like worse than in Business Central. Like,
wow.
Using crystal reports and all this, like,
that's going way back.
Yeah, there's places that still use it. And so it was funny when I worked there, like, they sold Microsoft Azure services and they had this whole networking practice, and I started gravitating towards, hey, our customers should use Business Central because it would be way better than all the stuff that they were using. And in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, maybe I should go back. And I had so many friends in the community that when the time came, I came back, and I was
it's a great community.
Accepted. Yeah,
it's a great community. That's one thing about it, and it's a vast community, but it's a small community at the same time. I'll give you guys a big secret. Kris doesn't even know this. Big secret about me. I left the channel for a very short period of time too. At one point, I left to go work and manage a C#. That's the language. We had a software application, but it was a C# group. Kris, you didn't even know that. I did that as well.
I knew you worked on C#. And so that's interesting. How long were you gone then? Just curious.
A little over a year. And then I was having a bad day. And then somebody from the channel called me up and said, "Hey, how would you like a job?" And I said, "When can I start?" It was just coincidentally, I was just having a rough day. And I said, "Okay, I'm coming back." But I did leave for a short period of time. And here I am. And now they'll probably bury me here. As an old dinosaur. So it is. No, it is. It's good to come back. And so now you're much happier with the language. And you think also now, just from your discussion, that it is more appealing to those that have other skills with development and other languages. There's several of them out there that use the modern environments. Even the VS Code, I think, is some familiarity. It's much easier for them to come in and work with it. Because I think if you have to work with I think if you understand the fundamentals, I always had a mindset that a language is a language, development language or spoken language. If you really understand what you're trying to do, or you understand what you want, you can easily learn how to say it. So it's even like development. Like to me, I always said we should focus on understanding what we're developing versus copying and pasting or trying to figure it out. It's okay, what am I trying to do? Because then you can figure out what you need to do based upon the language that you have, just like the spoken word. Because if I'm lost in a foreign country that speaks something other than English, if I have to go to the restroom, I'll figure out how to say it because I know I need to go.
It's the basic.
Just the basics. So you mentioned also you've been working, getting more involved in the community. What have you been doing within the community?
So I think in the past year, I've been speaking at a couple different conferences, so Summit and Dynamics Live. I think being able to present as a developer is really like a unique situation to be in, because you have to understand like both sides of, like the application, and then how can we improve it? How can we make these changes, or where can we use all of the Microsoft tools that are available? So I think I've been presenting on topics that are things that I feel are very beneficial to like end users, because it's end user focused conferences, things that you could go home and like implement right away. So
no, that's great. It's not easy to present technical content. I think, I'm not saying it's easy to present any content, but I know presenting technical content in some cases, trying to explain it in a way to ensure that everybody understands, sometimes can be difficult. And sometimes the content is pretty rich, and, trying to phrase it or frame it to a point where it can be picked up in a period of time, because it's a matter of balancing what background do you assume or not. So how do you prepare for your presentations? We could share stories here.
And how did you get
about that?
And how did you get started? Like what prompt you to like, hey, I'm going to start, presenting?
Well, I think just having a lot of understanding of like Business Central and wanting to like share my knowledge, or I guess it almost kind of validates in a way that like the product, or how to be a developer. Like if you can go and teach someone else how to do something, that really shows that you have a really good understanding of what it is that you're doing. So in terms of development, being able to, simplify it so someone else could go and reproduce what you're doing, I think is huge, because a lot of times, you can go and find a video, or you're on some of the community forums, or, I think back to being a C# developer on Stack Overflow, where you're just trying to go through and figure out, how do I do this? How do I implement it? And you can't necessarily copy and paste code, so you have to understand what you're doing, and to be able to, reiterate it in a new way, so somebody else will be able to pick up and understand how to do it themselves, is, I think, huge.
That is excellent. You had a key point there. The ability to teach validates what you know, because there's, some adage to those that do versus those that teach, but someone that both does and teaches is someone who's proficient in that, because you understand it enough to explain it and teach it to someone else. I think that's great that you can do it. But now we'll go back. What do you have to do to prepare for these presentations? From the technical aspect, what's the process that you go through?
So a lot of the presentations that I've done haven't been like super technical. Like, I'm not writing like AL code. I was trying to present topics that need a developer involved, but it's not, you're going to go write this huge customization. So how do you build a Teams integration with Business Central? How do you create all of the bricks that display inside of Teams? Or my last presentation was on Excel reporting, and so, like, I came from it from the perspective of, you don't have to have a developer write you custom code, but this is where then a developer could come in and create you the data set and make that available, so you could build all of the Excel report layouts. So I think the biggest thing for me was trying to figure out, how do you present like your slides and then switch over and present like a demo. Like, that part of it is always the part that trips me up, I think, the most, is making sure everything works, and especially when Wi-Fi is spotty, it's always tricky.
It is. Sometimes you never know what you're getting into. So you have Docker containers prepared, or you have some PowerPoint prepared. And I've even gone through some cases, I've recorded myself doing something, and then I embed it within the PowerPoint, and I can play the video and speak to the video. So at least I know I'll have what I have consistently, because I think we've all had some situations when we're doing presentations. And if you haven't, you will, where I worked on something, I tested, I prepared, then I go to do the demo, and boom, there's an error. Why? Because something.
Right.
Something's not working, something's not right. But at least, fortunately, now with the containers and the scripts, you can make sure that you have a consistently refreshed system. Whereas years ago, it wasn't so easy to get a refresh system. So no, that's great. It's great that you get on there and presenting and spreading the word and sharing with the community. And even your topic, you may not say that it's too technical, but bridging the gap between like the business users and development, and how to work together, is another area that we need to have some concentration on within the community. So it's good that you're doing that to talk, there's a differentiation between, the roles so far as, and then multiple people can do multiple things. So it's great. Have you worked with GitHub Copilot yet?
Not a whole lot.
Oh, okay. You were talking about that, so I was going to bring it up. I started working with it a while ago, and I do pay the subscription with it. So I just wanted to get your take on it. I'm completely impressed with it. It's like anything else; you have to validate and do and review what it presents. But it's done some amazing things for me. You talk about speeding up development.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
It just removes like those nuances, right? It just so you can focus on the actual solution itself and then validating.
It does. It does so much for you. It's almost like dynamic snippets on steroids, right? But it actually has a little more content in it. It fills out a lot of stuff for you. So it's it's something. It's this world is changing. So I think something like that, or that ability, will also help us get more technical resources into the community.
Tonya, one thing that's with your history of getting to Nav, you coming from a modern development and then going to Nav Cal, what was the biggest pain point of like getting into Cal? Like, what was like, why does this not exist in Cal?
I think
she doesn't have enough time to answer that.
Right. Honestly, I think it's just that you could go in and you could put your code wherever you wanted. There was no source control. It was the Wild West, and making sure like we had a development environment. Did those objects get moved over to production, and how do you manage that? If somebody was working on something and then they overwrote it, how do you know what's in there? Like, just the whole management of it was horrible.
All these nightmares come back.
Right?
We tested this. Oh yeah, but okay, we didn't move everything.
We're laughing out of nervousness
because it's just the overlap of the objects, because you had to move the whole object. Then you would look to do a compare, and okay, was this part of this? Oh, this object wasn't the original object. Somebody didn't move it. It's just, I could tell you all the stories and things that I've seen. Oh, the data.
Oh, you forgot to move this table over, and now you're locked out of everything because it doesn't compile. And
oh, yes, we've come a long way. I definitely don't want to go back. I try not to touch any. I try not to touch anything old. Just out of fear. Nightmares will come back to this time. So your transition along the way. So you came to it. Obviously, you had left for a little bit and you came back, but now I take it you're here to stay with the new environment.
Yeah, I think it's really just cool to see how much Microsoft's come and invest in Business Central and making it like, you're a Microsoft, like you're buying into the whole Microsoft. So everything's so well integrated and it works really well together that it's kind of no-brainer when you join Business Central, that like this is your home, and being able to export to Excel or have your emails integrated or all of the different things that are involved. It's cool to be able to work on all those different integrations.
From the development angle, what resources do you use to keep up? You mentioned some of the you mentioned some things. You talked about some of the Microsoft Learn, some of the forums that you look at, but what is it that you use as your go-to for the resources? And then also you can throw in there, what are your favorite extensions for VS Code, for Business Central, or for AL? I like to load up questions at one point in the conversation.
Yeah, that's a lot of questions. Let's see. So in terms of, I guess the last question was extensions to use inside of VS Code, like all the Git lenses, or like Waldo has all the extensions or the templates, that make everything super fast, loading everything up. I'm sorry, I totally drew a blank on what the other questions were. There's so many of them.
see. So we asked you to mention some of your go-to VS Code extensions for AL, and then you mentioned some of the other resources that you use to keep up with the application or to assist with development. But what are your go-to ones on the regular, besides Microsoft Learn? I think Microsoft Learn we all go to. The material is getting much better since people can now contribute to it in the community. I'm happy to see a lot of the documentation get a little more detail. It's always been there, but now a lot more detail is being added to it, such as examples and broader explanations. But what are some of your go-to resources from the development point of view?
I think being connected with people in the community has been huge. So following people's blogs, and they're constantly putting out new content. Like I think when I'm working on something, I know at one point there was some of Brad's blogs that I came across that I'm like, oh my god, amazing! Like,
wait. Can we repeat that?
yeah. So I was working on an API, and I was like reading the JSON response back, and I was trying to figure out how to get the value that I needed because the field had a dot in it, and I was super frustrated, and I'm doing all this research. How do you, because this is then, it's not Business Central development. This is, JSON. Like, how do you consume it? How do you traverse the whole JSON, thing? So I'm sitting there, and I came across your blog, and it was, I think, to put it into a dictionary and loop through it, and I was, this is, it's a C# principle that we're using in, Business Central. So that was super.
No, it
But
is.
I think just having those blogs is super helpful because anytime, like if I'm stuck on something or I need to look into something, I'll put it in Google, and I'll always go towards the blogs before I'll go towards Microsoft documentation, because people in our community are super cool about sharing their knowledge and information, and typically have examples of how they implemented it.
Yeah,
It's
just even
true.
from someone else's perspective, right? Like you may go in the right direction, but then you research something and someone looks at it in a different direction, can get you thinking of maybe how you would structure your solution. I'm glad you found Brad's stuff. I look at his stuff too from time to time.
It is. It is nice within the community that people share, and it's good that you want to do it. I've come to have the mindset that if I had a question or if I had something, somebody else will have it too. So sometimes
Yeah.
I'll throw out, it's obviously a lot of it's time permitting. I mean, I'd love to share
Right.
everything I come across, but I too also look at other resources, because sometimes, as to Kris's point, sometimes just looking at it from a different perspective totally changes your view, and like, it's that easy, after spending, sometimes hours trying to figure something out, and how can I actually do this? And then you see another one, you're like, wow, why didn't I see that? But at least you understand it. So it is good for everybody to share. And also sharing sometimes is helpful, because once you put yourself out there, you do get some more connections, and two, you do get some feedback on your content as well, which is good, because I like that in the community, because sometimes you get the feedback saying, oh, you can also do this, or you can also do that, which also helps me learn. And I enjoy having the conversations with everybody. So we'll have to have our regular group of, sharing now. We'll have to put Tonya into the meeting. We'll just have like a channel somewhere, and we can just share some stories, which is good. So that's,
I think Twitter is kind of, the newbie to like my place to go for sharing or help or helping other people in the community. I think my Twitter account way back when, and I'm like now resurrected from the dead, so I can interact with people in the community, ask questions, and be able to, see what other people are working on as well.
Yeah, Tonya, you've done some speaking sessions, are you looking to also blog and share your knowledge as well?
Yeah, so I've been doing it like through my LinkedIn profile, that I've been writing like blog posts. I don't have like an official blog, but at least when I come across something that, like Brad said, where you get stuck and you kind of have the aha moment, and you're, okay, I spent all this time, I found 5 different people's perspectives. I'm going to put it together in one place so I can go back and reference it, or maybe it'll help someone else in the future, with their problems.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I would love to see someone write up, and this could be you, Tonya, is that, you have...
Wait, how come you didn't give me the idea?
Well, you may not have the same perspective as Tonya. For someone coming into the AL world, coming from a different programming language, one of the things that I would love to see is like, what are the gotchas? Like you want these younger talent to, because like Brad was mentioning earlier, you're running out of, resources in the development space. And so you want these younger talents from either coming out of college or coming from a different programming language, now that AL is considers a modern language, to give them a little leg up and say, hey, these are the gotchas getting into AL, right? That would be a good topic to discuss, because you can go into a rabbit hole getting into the AL and trying to figure it out.
Man.
So, yeah.
I'm even trying to think of some of the gotchas. I don't know. I can't think of any.
I think even just having like a list of resources where you're like, oh, if you're just starting out, here's, where you could go to find videos, or here's where you could go to have tutorials on how to set things up. And even with the people that I work with, having some sort of documentation on how do you create a Docker container, how do you connect to it, all that kind of stuff. Even if you're a newbie, sometimes you get tripped up. Man, I forgot how I did this. So,
yeah, creating your own library of stuff too, tracking it out just in case you need to reference something back. And I think that goes back to maybe, writing up those things and having your own blog, because then you can, sometimes you reference your own blog. I have to research something because I forgot, and my blog showed up. I was like, oh, geez. I wrote this like years ago in the community. So it's funny.
No, the community is great. We do have a great community. Well, Tonya, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. We really appreciate it. We know your time is valuable. I was looking forward to speaking with you from the technical point of view. I have other conversations we're going to have, so we'll have to have you come back on again and talk about some things, and maybe we can share your new blog, because Kris was trying to get you to push there, but we'll get you. The LinkedIn articles, I think, are good too. You can do the newsletters and the articles without having to worry about the hosting of it, because it does all show up now. I mean, if it's all about searching now, and those LinkedIn articles do show up, so it's a good place to do it. And like you said, I think the Business Central community, to me, appears to be a lot of people on Twitter as well as LinkedIn as far as sharing the information. So I think you can get there. But if you would, you take a moment to tell everyone how they could get in contact with you to learn about some of the great things that you're doing, if they have any questions that maybe you can help them with, and also learn a little bit more about your presentations that you put together.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to get in contact with me would be through LinkedIn. I will be sure to share the direct link with you guys. You can post that out.
We'll definitely put that in the show notes.
Sounds good. And I guess you can find me on Twitter as well. I'm not on there as much as LinkedIn, but I'm hanging out with all the cool kids in the community. So
we'll have to find you. We'll put your Twitter link. Twitter. What do they call it? Twitter. Twitter link. Twitter handle. Twitter handle. Okay, we'll have your Twitter handle. We'll put that in there as well too, so everyone can come hang out with you and the other cool kids at the park,
including dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Hang out with the dinosaurs with short little arms.
I think one of these conferences I'll have to show up in one of those dinosaur costumes.
Yeah.
When you walk through the hall with those big inflatable costumes, just to just so everyone is. But again, thank you, Tonya. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Cheers.
Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.